Welcome to the Women at the Top podcast interview series. My name is Regina Barr, and I am the founder of the Women at the Top Network. I'll be your host today. Joining me today is author Maribel Arango Topf. Maribel has been at the helm of Mitchell One's and Snap-on Diagnostics' Rapid Continuous Improvement Division for over 20 years, fostering a culture of excellence and innovation. Her leadership impacted over 900 employees across 8 facilities, driving the integration of Lean and Six Sigma with a human-centric approach, ensuring their processes are as agile as they are meticulous. Maribel's 20-year tenure oversaw over 10,000 personal and team projects, over 2,500 associates trained, with results leading to over 500,000 hours of employee hours saved and doubling their division's operating income. Boy, that sounds pretty good. Welcome, Maribel, to our call today.
Thanks, Regina. It's really fun to be here.
Yeah, I love hearing all the amazing things that you've accomplished. So let's go ahead and jump in and get rocking and rolling with our questions today. So I have a lot of questions for you and really looking forward to our conversation. So my first question is, your book focuses on culture of process implementation in businesses, and it has a unique title for a business book. You don't often hear the word alchemy, and your book is called Process Alchemy. So tell us a little bit about what led you to write a book by that name.
So Process Alchemy, really, when you work with employees, they take and transform things all the time. And so I think people miss that when it comes to process improvement, that element that employees bring to the table. They bring their ideas, their skill sets in different ways all the time. And they transform the company when done properly in many, many ways. And I don't think enough companies truly leverage all of the assets, the collective cumulative assets of their employees. They tend to rely on a couple, kind of the stars or whatever. But when everyone is required to participate in continuous improvement of any level or, some level of contribution, which our companies were, it makes a difference. Every little piece starts to transform in different ways. It has a cumulative effect. And so that's why I wanted to call it, process alchemy, because it's not just improvement. It's that transformative change that happens when the culture gets put into it, the mindset, everyone is part of the problem-solving culture. You want every employee to have eyes and ears on the business, letting being able to be proactive with the company, not waiting until you're in crisis mode, until after the fact when you have to deal with it. You never really want to be in a reactive mode for more than 10 or 15% of the time. You really want to be more strategic than that.
Well, I love that you focus on involving and engaging all of the employees, which I think is so critical. And then I love that idea and that visual that I can get from what you're saying about transformation. So I love the title, and I hope that others like it too. So over the course of both my corporate and consulting career, I've been involved in a lot of enterprise-wide change management. I feel like that's my middle name. And I know firsthand that implementing change can be hard. And when possible, people will avoid it like the plague. And I'll hazard a guess that you've experienced that too. So tell us a little bit, how do you handle that resistance from existing staff when implementing new processes? And how do you manage this type of change effectively?
I think first you have to honor the skill set of the employee, and you have to honor their contribution, who they are, and what they bring to the table. So kind of my first element is to really position myself, the position itself, properly. So I always tell people, even the most elite athlete has a coach, and that coach is not in competition with the athlete. The athlete is the one that is shining, even though you probably don't even know the name of the coach behind that person. So when you think about continuous improvement in the CI role, or anybody who takes on that kind of role, that's exactly what it is. You acknowledge that, hopefully, and for me, I always felt like you're dealing with star employees. You want to give everyone kind of the assumption that you're dealing with the best and really let them know you are the best. So when you're coming into making change management and process improvement, all that, it's not about saying, oh, you're not doing it well, or, there's flaws in how you do things. It's really about, how can I help you take what you do and take it to the next level? Because every athlete wants to take it to that next level. They know they're good, but they're always wanting to improve and become better and find different strategies and techniques on how they can improve their performance. When it comes to all employees, that's exactly what you're looking for in process improvement. You really want to be that force that helps them look at their own processes, look at their own, workflows and how they do things, and how do you make them better. So it's never a threat. So when it comes to change management, you're really not saying, I'm changing things because you're not doing it well. It's, no, we've gotten to this point, because you're great at what you do, but how do we take the company, your position, your career, whatever, to that next level, So my job has always been about helping all of our teams or employees to visualize what they already do in different methodologies, in different ways, so that they can get that aha moment. They can create new strategies. They can create new ideas in order to improve, their work performance, their workflows, the processes, strategies, whatever it is that they're working on. So I always say, whatever you're doing, my job is to help you do it better. It's not about coming in and changing things up. And so I always tell people, if you position that correctly, then change management is no longer a threat. It's not, I don't need to make a change. Don't come in here and telling me what to do. You don't know what I do. And you want to remove that defensiveness by really just telling people you're the best, but even the best athlete still needs a coach, still needs someone to help them showcase and show different ways of doing things, and, creating different, becoming partners in their own, performance, skill set, careers, whatever that they're working on, right? And so when you position it differently, I think people are a lot more open. When they think of it more as a coaching, as opposed to kind of a consultant that's coming in there and boom, 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 we're going to change all of this because you're doing it wrong. I think it makes a huge difference in their attitude, their willingness to be open. And what you really want is for everyone to be very open-minded, ready to go, ready to participate, ready to work with you. If you have too much resistance, you're going to slow everything down. You're going to be dealing with the battle of the personality and everything first before you can even get to the point of actually improving and getting all those benefits as to why you started down this process.
Right. So, we're going to walk hand in hand with the process improvement, and it's not about fixing you. It's just really moving things to the next level. And I think that's the key takeaway that I would want our listeners or viewers to take away today. So in your book, you talk about how most process methodologies work, but there are common challenges in implementation of these processes. So in brief, what is the main hurdle to sustaining processes, especially process methodologies, over the long term?
Well, the simple answer is auditing. Oftentimes, ideas never get fully implemented. And when they get implemented, they're not audited to make sure that they're actually working, right? So we would never call it done until you could prove that it had been working for a couple of months. And part of that is, at 2 or 3 months, is the process change still working? Did it do what it was supposed to do? Are you hitting all the new metrics? Are you hitting all those numbers that you said you were going to do? Or did it slip back? Did you actually fully execute it? Or was it just an idea that half of the things got done? So for me, getting it fully implemented, continuously auditing to make sure that it's being followed, is just the basics. And the other piece too is communication. They kind of go hand in hand. So oftentimes when we do a change or a new process or, something different, we put so much effort into the strategy, the execution, and all of that, and we fail dramatically in the communication of how that's going to go. So you have half of the employees saying things like, oh, when did that happen? When did this change occur? When did we, change from this to this? There's a lot of confusion. And so we don't usually put in a communication strategy along with the actual execution implementation. So to me, both are critical, right? You need to make sure that everybody understands change is coming, or, a change in a process or a workflow or whatever. This is why it's being done, giving, some explanation and context as to why it was necessary or what we're expecting to achieve. You don't want to surprise people. One day you did it one way and the next day somehow you missed the meeting and nobody told you, you weren't part of the memo. Sometimes I hear a lot of people say things like, oh, it's on a need to know basis. And you're like thinking, but I needed to know, so why wasn't I on the list?
Exactly. So the other piece too, I think that's really critical anytime you're doing change management or process improvement is celebrate the wins. Yay. Right? So that people can feel like what they're doing is making a difference. So speaking of making a difference, there is a difference between change and improvement. So can you explain to our audience the difference between the two?
So I usually tell people, and it's not just change, but sometimes when people hear process improvement, the common confusion is that they're going to do a change. And sometimes they think that change involves an amount of effort or time or money or whatever. And so the way that I explain it to people kind of as a funny way is, I can spend a lot of time, effort, money to get my hair the perfect shade of neon green, but did it really improve my appearance, professionalism, and, the image that I'm trying to convey? A lot of time, a lot of money got spent, definitely a change, but did it really improve or move me forward? That's the difference versus if I'm trying to create a professional look, it might just be a simple haircut, maybe, I haven't had a haircut in a while and a quick, trim and clean up gets me back to that professional look that I want. And not that expensive, not that much time, not that much effort. So I always tell people it's not about the time and the effort, that you're putting in and a lot of movement and motion. It's did you get the results that you were looking for? Did you hit those metrics that you were looking to improve upon? Or, did you take it to that next level? Or are you still in the same old, just looks a little different? You just changed the color of the paint, instead of being blue, it's now green. But did it really matter? Other than the fact that you spent, again, and I always tell people time isn't free. And that's one of the common mistakes that people do. The minute that you start investing your time in some sort of, endeavor that isn't free, the time that you spent doing that could have been spent doing something else. And so if you're saying that this is important for me to finish or accomplish or fix, that's great. So you should see some results from it. It shouldn't just be a cosmetic difference of some sort. So I always tell people, be very careful that you understand what you're trying to accomplish and that you're not just making a lot of movement and just, changing and doing a lot of cosmetic appearances or different things to the process, that it's actually doing something significant, as chances are you're going to spend significant resources, time, effort, energy, focus, you name it. And you really want to make sure that that's going to give you something for that effort.
I think that's a great analogy that you gave us, and then love that you've been able to very articulately explain those differences. So I want to talk a little bit about change. One of the things I could think we can say is most people don't like to fail, and people don't like to talk about failure, whether it's personally or professionally. So your book does talk about how the discussion of why something failed is a critical piece of creating that operational excellence that I think most organizations are hoping to achieve. So tell us a little bit more about this, about failure and why is it important?
So one of the things that happens is, and this kind of comes down to communication as well. It's all about communication. When we talk about, being open about, hey, this isn't going well, or, this didn't go well, we tried this and it didn't work. The way that someone reacts to that is going to really reinforce the culture as to whether or not we'll discuss it again. Because if somebody did not react well to bad news or a missed deadline, what's going to happen? The next time that something bad is happening, I'm just not going to tell you because I don't want to deal with, the confrontation, the conflict, and everything else. So I always tell people, do you want to be blindsided or do you want to know? Because if you know early enough, that reduces your risk. If I know 3 weeks before that there's something kind of not going well and I can start to change strategy, or I can have the discussions, or I can talk to people or whatever, I'm going to be able to be more proactive versus if everybody knows that something is happening. And how do you know this? Employees will say things like, if management only knew. My first question is, why doesn't management know? Why aren't you speaking up? What happened? Why are you so afraid to, raise your hand and say, hey, sometimes you don't have a natural way of doing this, meaning that I always talk about meetings that have agendas that are so tight that there's no room for a final, hey, is there anything else we should be talking about or discussing or anything, right? So we don't leave an opportunity to bring up those issues. And so what happens? Somebody says, well, I really don't want to send an email to the boss and be the one that, raises the flag or whatever. So how we handle those difficult conversations, if it becomes an easy thing, like, I can just tell you, hey, you know what, this thing didn't work. And someone says, okay, well, tell me about it. I talk about a meeting that I had, years ago, and it actually happened to be, we were having some customer facing issues and it was very stressful and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And somebody had finally kind of gotten together and understood a little bit of kind of what was happening. We had this meeting. The president happened to be in the meeting, and it has been explained to him what's going on, what we think is happening, all this stuff. Conversation ends. You could feel the tension. Everyone's kind of looking down because no one wants to see his reaction. And his reaction was fantastic. He looks up and he says, what did we learn? Changed the entire, everybody was now in problem-solving mode and ready to go.
It's interesting, yes, that if he had reacted in a negative capacity, it would have totally changed the tone and tenor of that conversation. But I was going to say is that in some of my work, I've used Gino Wickman's work, Traction, with some of the small businesses that I've worked with, and they have a acronym. It's IDS things: you identify, discuss, and solve. And they deliberately create time in an agenda to do that. And I think that's partly what you're saying here, is that you want to create that tone where people can have a failure, but then focus on, okay, like the president said, what did we learn? What can we do differently? What's our way forward? So I think that's a great approach and a great example. But I want to move the conversation forward a little bit. So I like to believe that people try to do their best and to bring their best forward, I guess. So when I look at what you're talking about in terms of continuous improvement, I like to believe that most employees do strive to improve and that they like to receive a recognition for these improvements. So in your experience, how do you properly recognize and acknowledge improvements? Because I think what you're talking about is a lot of companies really focus on when things go wrong and not when the things are going right.
And reward the arsonist firefighter situation, right? They may not even realize they're the ones who caused the problem, but they're at the end, they were the ones who solved it, and so they get rewarded, and everybody else is looking at them going, "Are you kidding me? If they had been better at their job, this wouldn't have happened in the first place." I read it, and I can't think of the book right now, but I read a great book, the difference between acknowledgement and rewards, and kind of the philosophy there was to not reward, because sometimes that creates that behavior that gets you to be a little bit to cause you not to bring things up. Because if you tell me that I'm the best employee ever, then I can't bring up a ton of failures, because then you're not going to believe I'm the best employee ever, if there's something that goes wrong. So they'd mentioned about doing acknowledgments, acknowledge what I did. And so they always said, phrase the statements in a way that the person receiving it could say, yes, I did, you finished that on time, or, this project, created great customer satisfaction. Something that you could respond to thinking, yeah, it did. I did do that, to really reinforce, the activity that we did that is, approved, and not just a general vague, you're great. Because then you have so much subjective, well, what if something happens and I'm not great, and you start to create that almost cheating behavior. And so, well, I don't want anybody to know that I'm not fantastic and perfect and all of that, versus keeping the conversation, more honest in terms of what you're doing. So for us, we had a little kind of a recognition program, but we took a lot of the subjectiveness from it. Every time you completed a project, we would give you points, and you could redeem those points for some nice thank you gifts. And so there was no competitive element or anything else. It was more about if your project was approved, completed, and did what it was supposed to do, here's some points. And you just started adding those up. And then at the end, we'd slap on tools. So sometimes we had tools and stuff, things that people wanted. And there was an encouragement to continue, documenting your work. And that was important for us, by the way. It wasn't just doing the work, but documenting it, because that allowed sharing to happen. Because if you do the work, but you don't document it, then we wouldn't know that you had done all these great things. And we wouldn't be able to leverage some of those cool ideas and things with all the other facilities as well. So sharing and documenting was a critical piece of this for us. So it was trying to create an incentive to tell us about what you did, give you a reward for accomplishing and actually, recognize your efforts and what you did, and have, everybody know what you did, but also to be able to share that information with everybody else. So we weren't doing the whole reinventing the wheel when we didn't need to.
Right. That's great. And, even documenting things, and if you're authoring something, that's a form of recognition as well. So I think that's another way to recognize people's work and showcase what they're up to. So I don't know if you know, but I'm a former corporate marketing executive, and I had a variety of communication roles. So I know how important the words we use matter in what we say and what we do. So tell us, from your perspective, what is the role that language plays in creating a robust culture?
It is amazing to me how many mistakes, the root cause for a lot of issues, came down to words. Things as simple as the word good. That's good. Well, the way you define good and the way I define good is differently. And I have a higher standard than you do. So you do work and you complete it, you push it off to the next person, then I sit and go, that's not acceptable. That wasn't something that I would have said was ready to go to the next step. So sometimes it's a word that everybody uses that doesn't mean the same thing to different teams. I'm going through that right now, with some teams, things like, in software, the word build, how they produce and create that final product. Different teams have different requirements for that word. The build means XYZ, and another team believes the build is XYZ, but we're using the same word. We think we're having the same conversation, but we're not. And oftentimes what we see is decisions are being made in comment that you said, everybody, it does do the best work that they can. I truly do believe that. But sometimes my definition, the way that I understood the statement that was made to me, hey, can you take care of XYZ? The way that I defined it versus you, I went ahead and did the work and did it the way I thought that I interpreted it. And it was great. And I put my best effort just to find out that that's not what you meant. You expected something totally different. And now there's kind of a conflict because you're like, you did it wrong. And I'm thinking, no, I did it right based on my interpretation, based on my definition of, the instructions. So I always tell people before a meeting, don't make a lot of assumptions, clarify, especially with action items. Hey, you asked me to do, XYZ. this is what it means to me. Is this what it means to you? I mean, I've seen things get derailed 6 months because somebody used a plural. In one case, it was diagram versus diagrams. And that plural implied a whole different workflow. And a vendor went and did 6 months worth of work before we caught it. That was in a whole different way than it should have been. All because we thought everything was leading to one. They thought it was leading to multiple. It's just amazing how little simple things can trip us up. And I'm constantly reminding people, don't assume we're having the same conversation. Always clarify, always, recap and state back to the person, okay, so what you wanted me to do or what you meant was, or what I'm going to do is X, Y, Z, because that's how I interpret it. Is that what you meant? And having somebody hear that, acknowledge, yep, that's what I meant. That's what we're doing. As opposed to just assuming that, oh, yeah, got it. And then you move forward just to find out you didn't get it. So
you didn't get it. Yes, exactly. I think having those clarifying conversations is so critical and important. Time saver, frustration saver, and time and money saver, really, when you boil down to how much time and effort. You said 6 months. I'm thinking, OMG.
It was expensive.
Yes, no kidding. That was an expensive learning opportunity, we'll say, because we are talking about continuous improvement today. So we are actually winding down on our time. I know it's probably hard to believe these interviews go so quickly, but if you could share with our listening or viewing audience one piece of advice, just one, that you could give them today regarding continuous improvement or change management, what would it be?
Don't overcomplicate it. Start small. People want to take on huge projects or else it's not worth it. And that isn't true. I think if you just feel like anything I do, if it's better than what it used to be, is a great start. And once you get into that mentality and it becomes a habit, then it becomes so much easier when it comes time to tackling the bigger things because you're used to it. You don't run a marathon tomorrow if you haven't trained. You start with half a mile for a couple of days, then a mile, then a couple of miles, and eventually that 26 miles doesn't feel like it's a huge challenge. You're ready to go. You're ready for it. And process improvement is the same. Start small. It's okay. Don't think that, because what ends up happening if you think it's too big, you don't even get started. And you'll never see the benefit of the improvement. You'll never get into the habit of doing that. You'll never change the culture if you just don't start. So I always tell people, don't make these huge plans for it. Just get started. Pick something small and just do it. And be a role model and have other people do it and share the excitement of seeing little wins. And eventually it becomes such a natural habit, and then it starts to move much, much faster. Now it's not just 1 or 2 projects, it's 10 or 15. It's the bigger projects. You're tackling it better. You're doing more. And it gets easier every time. Like I said, you don't run a marathon. You don't wake up in the morning and say, today, I'm just going to go ahead and sign myself up and start running. You're probably going to fail and you're not going to feel great about it. But I think if you decide today, I'm just going to run a few blocks and get myself ready to go, you're going to feel so good because you did something, you feel accomplished. And tomorrow you're going to be more likely to continue doing it because you had a great day the day before.
Couldn't agree more. And I always like to say that energy begets energy. So when you do something, that energy multiplies and then you're able to do more and more and more. So that's all we have time for today. I do want to thank you, Maribel, for being here today with us. And a big thank you to our viewers and listeners for joining us today. See you next time.